What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hops Geek News, a podcast that talks about comic books, movies, TV shows, and of course, we feature a beer of the week typically. I am Matt. Alongside me is Lauren. This is a great creator interview that we have today with Chris Mcauley. He has written some amazing things, Doctor Who, he's Star Trek, Terminator, and he's also kind of dove into Dracula a bit. So, of course, first things, go ahead and find us social media, right? That's where you can find us the easiest way. Lauren's on the Instagram. I run Twitter. We dual hat the YouTube, all that kind of good stuff. So go ahead, subscribe, like, share, whatever it may be that you love to prefer to do. You can find us there. And thank you guys for so much for doing that. So, Lauren, I don't have anything different than what's going on. Are you still sipping on your same beer as well? Because I'm drinking Saturday morning is my beer. So what are you drinking over there?
I'm a slow sipper, so I'm still drinking my beer from our last interview. So I'm good. I got nothing for you. I'm on H2O right now.
Drinking water. Water's a big thing. So without further ado, like I said, we are here with a great creator. He is doing some really cool things such as Blood and Verse, Shadows by Gaslight. He has worked with Braxton Cosby, who you know is a friend of the show. He with Cosby Media Productions. He's done a lot of cool things with them. So here to talk about some of his works, without further ado, is Chris Mcauley. Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. How are you doing tonight?
Well, thank you very much, Matt and Lauren. I'm fine. Yes. I am not sipping Saturday's beer. I'm probably sipping Thursday's beer. So but, a nice pint of Guinness, of course.
Ooh, Lauren, that's Lauren's all-time favorite right there, Guinness.
Oh yeah, because Guinness is great for everything. It's just it cures your bones and it strengthens you, and I love ending the night with a Guinness. I love a Guinness anytime.
We tell ourselves that thing, but yes, Guinness is a fantastic beer to start the day with.
100%.
It really is, man. It's a good one. I know Lauren is a big fan. Our ultimate goal is to obviously get to Guinness. We're going to be close. We're going to be close in the summertime.
In Ireland, yeah. Well, what's interesting is if you travel around the Caribbean, they all have the extra foreign Guinness, which it's 7%. It's not your usual 4%, and it's much more bitter. But it's funny because so many people are like, oh, you can't have a stout on the beach. Yeah, tell that to anybody living in Jamaica or in St. Thomas or in the Bahamas, because they're drinking the extra foreign stout all over the beach in the hot sun. And you know what?
Guinness extra stout is fantastic. Yeah, it's actually the original Guinness. Now, Guinness was created because the Irish people used to eat a lot of oysters. And that was the reason why stouts were actually created. If you go to Temple Bar in Dublin, you will have a plate of oysters on ice, and they will serve it with Guinness, and that's the reason why stout was actually invented.
I actually never knew that.
I hadn't heard that either. But I've had more than one oyster stout, and I wonder if there's a connection to that, because for some reason oysters work well in stouts. I feel like it shouldn't, but it does.
The problem with that is it's whenever people start to bastardize Guinness. And usually it happens when they put like blackcurrant in or champagne or, oysters in Guinness. It's a nice pairing to have Guinness with oysters, but I'm not sure.
Well, I haven't had it with the oysters in the Guinness, but I've seen breweries, like I believe Funky Buddha did at one time, like breweries in the States, that they'll add it as an adjunct into a stout they're making. And I wonder, because I never thought...
Lauren, it's blasphemous. No. Never do that. We never do that, Lauren.
Like the first time I tried one, I'm like, an oyster stout. Oh, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm not brave.
It's a nice comparison, but you have to have the oyster and then wait a little bit and then have the stout
to have it complement each other.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes.
Well, our very first question we always like to ask our guests is your geek origin story. Now, you have been working on some of the most prolific properties in the geek world. How did you get your start as an author? What drew you to these writings of things like Doctor Who, Star Trek, Terminator, all of those good things? How did you get your beginnings? What drew you into this world?
Well, Christ, it was a while ago. So somebody who's known as the godfather of British comics, Pat Mills, he created 2000 AD and
Oh yeah, yeah.
Judge Dredd and Slaying and things like that. So Pat and I became steadfast friends, and he encouraged me to start to write. I started to write, and I wrote Judge Dredd and various other properties that Pat owned for 2080. And yeah, that was the start of it, really. And then I moved on a little bit. I became a comic book inker and colorist for Marvel and DC. And yeah. So I was starting to learn different aspects of the industry. My breakthrough came whenever a friend of mine who was doing a horror anthology, she asked me to write a Dracula story. So I wrote this thing called, was it Dracula, Lord of the Future? It was quite gory and all sorts of things. But anyway, the Stoker estate saw it, loved it, and then asked me to start working on Bram Stoker stories to turn them into graphic novels. And I suppose that's where it really all came from. Now, in between that, I worked with William Shatner on his Man of War series as well.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Sort of stuff. Yeah. So I've done a few things,
Just a few, right? Just a few little minor things
a
people
little
might
bit,
have heard of.
a little bit. Yeah.
Well,
That's
so now you're with Cosme Media Productions, and I know there's a couple things you've worked on through them. So you have Blood and Verse, Shadows by Gaslight, and you also have a Christmas story. So I wanted to go into each of these a little bit. I know we definitely have some questions about Doctor Who, as we're both huge Whovians, and Doctor Who comes back
Yes.
very soon, and we're loving the new Doctor. But can you tell us a little bit about Blood and Verse? I know it's like a collection of dark poetry. So how that came about and what people can
Yeah.
expect from that.
So this would be I'm a bit of a poet. I won awards for poetry and stuff like that. But I worked with a guy called Jeff Oliver, and Jeff was very keen to write Dracula poetry with me.
Dracula poetry. I love that.
Yeah, so we've got that. So we have some quite gory. My aspects of the Dracula mythos is not romantic. It's not the Hollywood stuff. It is what Bram Stoker originally intended. So Bram Stoker's Dracula is a narcissist. He's a rapist. He's a terrible, terrible individual. Nothing like Hollywood or Francis Ford Coppola.
yeah. They always kind of pick Dracula as like this suave,
Oh God,
kind of thing. It's not the case at all.
Yeah. I have traveled oceans of time. Never. The original. He's a monster. He's a Machiavellian monster. So it was nice to sort of write poetry linked to that, and that came out through Braxton. And I don't just write Dracula, it was nice to write children's stories as well, So we have the Enchanted kids stories, and I've written several other children's stories that have come out through Braxton as well. So that was quite nice.
Yeah, so I saw the Shadows of Gaslight sounded very interesting as well. So before we go into the Enchanted Holiday Tales, because I thought it was interesting that, I saw the kind of work that you work on, including Dracula and Doctor Who. And, Doctor Who is very light, but can also be very dark. All these stories have a lot of dark to them. And so does, Shadows by Gaslight. And then I see this Enchanted Holiday Tales. So I do have questions about that in a minute. But the Shadows by Gaslight sounded really interesting because it sounds like you have a lot of true crime in realism in there. And so can you tell us a little bit about that and how much research went into this?
I felt a responsibility because when I write Dracula, and you have to understand this, I'm writing Dracula with Bram Stoker's great and Bram Nephew. So I'm writing this from a very authentic sense. I'm writing Dracula from the notes of Bram Stoker and the letters. So there was 105 pages of Dracula that were ripped out of the book that you all have.
Oh.
I was given those 105 pages, and I felt a duty with Victorian society, and also because I was writing I write very dark stuff when it comes to
Mhm.
drama. I felt a duty to look at crime and look at how policing changed and forensics and all that. So that's what Shadows by Gaslight is. It looks at some of the worst crimes in the Victorian era, but also how humans react to that, how they try and combat that. And I was very lucky because before it was published, I had a TV producer, and they wanted to turn it into a 6-part series, which is actually happening now through a company called OOTF. So yeah, so that it's an interesting piece of work for me because it's the first sort of factual Victorian piece of work. But I felt that I had an obligation and a duty because I'd written so much fictional stuff about the Victorian era that I wanted
So
something factual to come.
is it all factual, or is it more like,
Oh, it's completely factual.
oh,
All of it.
wow, okay. I assumed you just took real stuff and it was stories based on that.
Oh no, it's
I'm blanking on the term right now.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
very common
It's
term.
absolutely a factual story,
Wow.
factual piece of literature. So so like yeah, how even how Victorian detectives were created. So you have obviously Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, but you have Dupin as well there. So all these various Victorian era detectives and how they were created, as well as forensics and how forensics were created in the Victorian era.
When I see also that in this you have it explores the stories of women who defied societal norms to engage in criminal activities. So what made you want to kind of focus on that a little bit?
Well, that's a fascinating one because there were baby farms. There were women who were poisoners, ladies who there was no way out from their marriage except from killing their husbands and embracing their lovers. Very interesting stories there. That's why I focused on that.
No, yeah, no, that's interesting, and it always fascinates me. It's like as a woman, you always think like, what would I do in those situations? It really like puts you between a rock and a hard place. And
Well, hopefully you wouldn't murder anybody. But
well, it depends on what the situation is.
Maybe
Hey, what a mother wouldn't do for her kids. No, but it's just such an interesting place to explore because I think the one thing that especially was done in history was underestimate what women were capable of. I think that still happens. So I think that sometimes a lot of this is like people just didn't see it coming. A lot of things come down to expectations sometimes.
Okay, Study in Scarlet with Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes did not underestimate Irene Adler. He not. He called Irene Adler the woman. It's very interesting. But yes, thank God we answered such terrible crimes with Scotland Yard, because that was basically what happened was you had the Victorian criminology in Scotland Yard, and there was terrible things that happened during that era. And it's wonderful to think that humans respond to those terrible things and want to solve them or want to bring people to justice. So yeah,
we like closure.
Yeah, I think the Victorian era of criminology very, very important, and we are obsessed with it. We do have that with films and TV and all sorts of things. There's a reason for that.
See, it's interesting because I'm not huge into true crime today, but when I hear these older stories, I find them more interesting. And I think because there's an extra level of mystery that I just don't understand how it worked. And it's absolutely mind blowing too, of how easy you could get away with things because we didn't have DNA. We didn't have cameras everywhere. We didn't have, all of this, a camera at your fingertips to video things. So it always kind of interests me. And how many things too were left unsolved. We have no idea about so many things that we never will.
Well, you must always be careful because your sin will always find you out.
Oh, I like that. I like that term. That's actually one I've never heard before. That's a good one.
Really? It's very old.
Yeah.
It's an old etymology. So yeah, no, you beware because your sin will find you out, and it does. And you look at the aspects of criminology from the past, and that's what happens. Yeah, people who commit terrible crimes are always found out in some way, and yeah, punished for it.
It's called
Now,
karma.
yeah. So you've talked about, you've done things from authoring, books about Dracula to books about Doctor Who, where you currently write with like magazines, to Marvel and DC. Do you kind of have a preference of like long form stories, or do you prefer like illustrating, working on like the shorter form content in comic books? Do you have a preference at all, or is it soothing to do one over the other, or switch back and forth?
It depends what it is. I write in every sort of format. So like audios can be sometimes quite fun because with audios you're really factoring in the environmental sounds and the actor he's writing those kind of things. That can be a lot of fun, especially if you're working with all star names. I was very lucky that I worked with all star names in my in the audio stuff I worked with. But yeah, it's there's that, and I love short stories because I think I've been in 50 odd books now of short stories. Um,
Mhm.
but it's that the challenge of the anthology that you're maybe going to get put into. Can you make it fit? What's the purpose behind it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think there's gotta, I mean, I'm not a writer myself, but I feel like there's gotta be an extra hard challenge of making a good short story, of having that beginning, middle, and end, and, making the reader truly enjoy it. I've read some fantastic short stories, but that's gotta be a difficult feat. So, we've talked about the dark stuff, and so now I want to. How did you end up working on Enchanted Holiday Tales? And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it was interesting looking at these projects you've worked on, and then seeing, like, we're both huge Christmas fans. If you've been
Oh
following
yeah.
us for a while, you'll see December we do nothing but Christmas movies. So tell us a little bit about Enchanted Holiday Tales,
Uh,
and
yeah, I'm not a dark person at all. Yes, I've won awards for horror and science fiction. I'm in the Comic Book Hall of Fame and all sorts. But I'm not really a dark person. Just so I started writing kids stuff. Uh, it was lovely. It was um, I actually dress up and portray Santa.
oh,
Uh,
I
I've
love
done
that
that
so
for
much.
yeah, I've done that for 15 years now.
oh wow,
For Cancer Fund for Children back home, and then for here for the Stollery. But yeah, it started with the Christmas tales and really wanting to write stuff for kids that was all about community, and then I wrote a Halloween series of stories which are coming out obviously this Halloween. And kids stories were very important to me.
mm,
Obviously, I learned to read as a child and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like horror is not my. It's actually not my genre.
hmm,
My
Really?
I don't. I don't watch horror films. I don't read horror books. I'm not. Um, and it was more of the kids stuff that actually interested me the most.
So okay, so I know we've kind of talked about how you've done, like, there's a very big difference. Like, you don't, horror's not your thing, but you've been very recognized in the horror world. What is that like for you? How do you kind of get into that mindset then, if you're not a big horror fan, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, you just write story, right? Story. You get context and story, and you write it.
hmm.
It's like anything else.
Simple. Yeah. No, that's very interesting, because I don't think I've ever met somebody that is so avidly known kind of in the horror universe be like, yeah, that's not my thing. Whereas they never would have thought to think like the children's, like, that's really cool that you do things for a cancer fund, for example. I think that's one of the coolest things out there. And it just shows like you don't have to get locked into one genre either. Just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you have to stay in that. You can do anything that you want in this world, basically.
Well, if you're a writer, you can write anything.
Mm,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're
And
not trapped within a genre, and I think that's the thing. I write poetry, which is about my parents or about myself or about the Irish experience. they've been read out by very famous people, and it's lovely. But as a writer, you're a writer.
Mhm.
You're not trapped by genre or. I suppose I'm most famous for the horror stuff, but um, I don't even see the things that I write. It's not necessarily horror; they're more dramatic. They're more,
Mhm.
it's-
Right, it's not just like
yeah.
Michael Myers trying to stab somebody,
Oh
it's more
Christ, no!
Dracula.
Oh Christ, no! I don't think it's like Michael Myers is stalking this person. He's got the knife ready, and he's taking that little knife gleams in the moonlight. He's going to stab that person. He stabs that person. Eat, 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 eat. Okay, and then he goes away, and then he goes, Christ, no! I couldn't write that stuff. I
Yeah,
couldn't
no,
write it.
Dracula is very, very different. But the Christmas one, reading the description, you get teleported into a world with snow and cozy homes and
Yeah.
bustle. I mean, this is someplace I want to visit. This sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So where did you come up with this? Was this channeling your childhood or just channeling like I mean, you must love Christmas. You dress up like Santa and made this story that
I
sounds,
do. Yeah, I do love
like I want to put a
it.
fire on and put my Christmas tree up.
It's something we all believe in, no matter how old we are. Once we stop believing in that, I think it's the death of society. I
Mm.
really do think that once we stop believing in Christmas, we're done as a species. Absolutely
There's
It's a
done.
good point. I think
something sweet and dark about that at the same time.
like
I mean,
people
I'm huge,
we're
huge,
we're
huge on
both
Christmas.
Christmas. We as soon as Halloween's over, man, like I'm ready to put the Christmas stuff out because I just love that it's a
I
feeling.
mean,
Christmas is a
Halloween, my
feeling.
whole
There's
house is Nightmare
excitement.
Before Christmas, so it's still Christmas in October.
True, but like I think there's very much truth in that the second we stop believing in like Christmas. And it's
'Cause
because
it's
it's this feeling.
magical.
There's this magical feeling about it. Now, whether you live in a desert, whether you live in a cold climate, we've kind of been conditioned to think about like it's cool, it's crisp, there's this magic in the air. Santa is like this loving being.
Here's let's look at it more than that.
Mhm.
Charles Dickens, what does he say about Christmas? It is the
Right.
one time of the year where we can become the person we've always wanted to be. I'm
Oh yeah.
paraphrasing, right? I don't give a fuck about Halloween. Not two fucks about Halloween. I care about, I actually really, really care about Christmas because I think it's the one time of the year where we get a glimpse of the person we can always be.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
It's
Well, I
very,
mean,
very powerful.
well,
it's a
because you gotta think like
feeling too.
everybody kind of bands together around Christmas time, right? It's all about helping out somebody, doing something nice for somebody. And the other, what, 364 days of the world, year, people are kind of caught up in themselves. So there is a very big truth in that too, where you're right. People want to naturally be helpful. Now, whether there's other circumstances or whatnot prevents you from doing that, or maybe just a shitty human being. But
Mm.
that is, I guess I never really thought of it that way. We are all about giving. It's a season of giving. And so
Right.
that resonates with
Dickens,
me, sure.
listen, Dickens is one of the greatest writers because a lot of people don't realize that Charles Dickens' father was in a debtor's prison for a very long
Mhm.
time. Dickens understood what it was like to be in poverty.
Oh yeah.
When you understand that and you look at Christmas Carol,
Yeah.
it takes
It's
on
a
a
new
new
meaning.
no.
Yeah.
Okay, Sigelman as well. The Sigelman. It's a Christmas ghost story as well. Dickens does these things that are just fantastic. But he's one of my heroes. He's one of my literary heroes because he's ethical. He was a moralist. I think writing shouldn't just be entertaining, but also be moralistic.
Yeah, and I
Um,
feel
Yeah.
like we've lost a little bit of that in this day and age.
Oh yeah.
Not completely, but I think reality TV it's
oh
not
well,
Brain rot.
I have to be
yeah.
careful because I've written reality TV for Stokerverse, but yeah,
Well, I think
it's not my
there's
thing. I don't like it. I don't like the conflict. Engineering conflict between human beings is a terrible bloody thing.
yeah.
Um, it's not ethical. It's not a good thing to do. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I write the most horrific, horrendous stuff. But what I do say is that good always wins in the end. if you actually read my stuff, it good always wins the end. Dracula is a Christian story.
Oh, that's
People
actually a really good
people
point.
don't
Yeah.
get that. Of course it is. I mean, Dracula is afraid of the cross.
Right.
He's
Yeah.
afraid of the sun. And anybody who understands mythology, it's that the sun is Christ was not crucified on a equidistant cross, but the equidistant cross means the sun. I mean, when Christ dies in the New Testament, the sun disappears. Right? It's the death of the sun. But that's why the cross, vampires are afraid of the cross. Silver, well, you have to look at Judas Iscariot, don't you? 30 pieces of silver.
Huh.
Mm.
I've never thought
Interesting.
about that or heard that. I've read the
No,
Bible and I never put
this
that
is
together.
awesome. Yeah, because
Yeah.
this is making me kind of like now I want to revisit some of these stories and really
Well,
think about
so Bram Stoker was Christian. Bram Stoker was the whole thing. Bram Stoker actually said that Dracula was a true story in his original preface.
It's just like a metaphor.
I'm not going to go into that because I'm not allowed to. But it was a true story. Absolutely, completely true story.
Interesting.
That is
But
fascinating.
but that's that's the origins of it. But it's not a dark story. It's not. For example, another aspect of this, when Mina drinks Dracula's blood and is forced to do so, the band of heroes break in through the door, and Dracula throws Mina from him and looks at them and says, do you want her now? Who's the person who goes running to Mina straight away? Jonathan. Jonathan runs to his wife and cradles her and loves her. Dracula has already lost at that stage. He's Jonathan Harker is a good man. He's not a cuck. He's not, he was one of the only people who ever escaped Dracula, climbing down the wall and, escaping Castle Dracula. This face at the stage is covered with blood and pus and all, because Dracula's an undead individual. So you think he's cutting open his breastbone with a very long, dirty, dirt encrusted nail. There's all this blood and pus pouring out, and he pushes Mina's face towards that. There's nothing sexual about that.
Huh.
And then he throws her from him.
Right.
And Jonathan runs straight to her. So it's, Dracula, and what Bram wrote, not the Hollywood shit that came after, but what Bram wrote was very much good versus evil. Very much good versus evil.
Yeah.
I heard, wasn't there like two versions of the Hollywood one where it was like in a different language and the one in a different
Spanish
language?
one, yeah. There's
with
Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi did the
but I heard that one was actually
one.
better than the English one. I haven't seen it.
There was aspects of it, but why Decker and I created Stokerverse was for 125 years the real Dracula was never seen.
Oh.
Like Ford Coppola's concept of Dracula was not the real Dracula either.
Right.
He slapped Stoker's onto it, but it wasn't the real thing. So that's why Decker and I did what we did. I'm quite passionate about it because it is one of the original vampire stories.
Right. Yeah.
Carmilla that came 20 odd years later from Joseph the Fanny, and that's different. That was the first sort of LGBT vampire story, Carmilla. But Dracula is very much a morality tale and very powerful. So
yeah, and Dracula is synonymous with vampire in pop culture.
Right.
Go ahead.
It became like what you were saying, Lauren. It's like Dracula's kind of kicked off the, when you think pop culture vampires, Dracula's at the source, and then of course, Chris, for you to be so passionate about it, I mean, you have a personal connection to it as well. On top of when you look at the duality of you go from Dracula to just like your love for, say, Christmas, for example, the good in the world, Dracula's the evil in the world. Like it makes perfect sense to have this deep personal connection to it, and I think that brings a really refreshing eye upon these kind of stories.
Mhm.
Denn die Totenreichen schnell, the dead travel fast.
Mm.
Ooh. I feel like I'm learning a lot. This is I am absolutely enjoying. I'm learning a lot. Um, but as we kind of start to wrap up, Lauren, do you have any final questions for Chris here as we get ready to wrap up?
Yes. So we did talk about these projects, and before we get off, you're going to find out where to get these projects. It's going to be in the show notes, and you will also learn how to follow Chris. So I do have a Doctor Who question as we are getting ready for the next
Yes.
season. So how did you end up writing for Doctor Who, and who's your favorite Doctor?
Um, think about that one. How did that? One of my heroes was John Peel. Whenever I was a kid, I used to get John Peel's Dalek books. John Peel, he was the protege of Terry Nation, who created the Daleks, and John and I became friends 15 years ago, and then I started writing the Dalek stories with John Peel and Dalek stories with one of the actors who is Davros. He's been Davros for 40 years. That's kind of how I get involved with Doctor Who. And then I've kind of moved on now, and it's been doing stuff for Russell T Davis, and
Mm.
I've been writing things for the official Doctor Who magazine and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's a progressive writing thing.
That's so
I
cool
love
that
that
you.
Daleks was your in. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
and the fact that you write for the official Doctor Who magazine, that's so huge, especially because a lot of us. I mean, Doctor Who is what bonded me and my wife when we first met. She obviously got into it through Nine. I did too, but David Tennant is the big for a lot of folks. But it's really opened the
Have you
doors.
have you watched the classic series?
I
I've
have
watched a
watched some of it.
handful of
Yes, from
episodes.
the episodes that I can find.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
have.
Yeah,
The
you can't
classic
find
series,
everything.
yeah, the classic series is far superior to New Who. If you watch Genesis of the Daleks, you will understand exactly what the Daleks are. The Daleks are born from hatred. The Cybermen are born from fear.
Ooh,
So
yes.
that's how I explain those things. But yes, classic Who is very very bloody powerful because it was allowed to be powerful.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
I'm not I'm not a New Who person, but I've written for New Who.
Mhm.
Oh,
I'd be
okay.
more. I'd be more the first Doctor to Paul McGann.
Okay.
Probably
Okay.
that's what I love. Um, I do like Christopher. I think Christopher Eccleston is probably one of the.
Underrated.
Yeah, he's one of the best Doctors
It's my
because
wife's favorite
he
personally.
was
Yeah.
He's
very 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 powerful.
hilarious and very
Yeah,
sassy, and he was so great, and
yeah,
I was really sad that we only had him for one season. Like, he was
Yeah.
yeah.
fantastic.
Very very
But
powerful Doctor. But
yeah.
Peter Capaldi's another favorite of mine.
Ooh,
He's
yeah.
very much like John Pertwee, and But for me, it's a classic Doctors because I kind of grew up with those guys, and um, the evolution of the sort of the aliens and the enemies and the Daleks and Cybermen especially were particularly terrifying.
Mhm.
The Seventh Doctor is one of my favorites, Sylvester McCoy. And I'm getting to write comic books now with the Seventh Doctor, which is really nice.
Oh,
Um,
that's fun.
but yeah, he's a very very dark Doctor,
Yeah.
Times champion, so he's very dark. I'm not very good with the Doctors that are quite light, so
That makes
Jodie Whittaker or well, Shitty's a great. I think Shitty's a great actor. I think there's going to be an awful lot with him that's going to
Mhm.
be explored. But I'm very much with the older and probably
Oh, that makes sense.
The
darker
classic ones, yeah.
Doctors. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think I think once we have a Doctor Who episode, we're gonna have to hit Chris up because I think there's a lot that we can learn. And also, like, there's so much Doctor Who stuff that we can go into.
Oh
For
my
me
gosh,
personally,
there
like
is, yeah.
a million stuff. But in the meantime, Chris, I want to say thank you for coming on, chatting about your works. Where is it that people can find you if they're looking for any of your novels, social media, anything like that?
So Google me. You'll get lots of that sort of stuff. If you go to Cosme Media Productions, you'll get the stuff I do at Braxton. If you go to www.stokerverse.com, you'll get all the stuff at Stokerverse. www.dark-legacies.com. You get all the stuff I do with Doctor Who and Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff with the actual Dark Legacies franchise as well that I co-create with Babylon 5's Claudia Christian.
Wow, you really dip into so many different genres. That's awesome.
So many massive
Yeah.
properties too. That's really awesome. But we want to say thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us.
Thank you.
We'll have to, we'll have to chat some Doctor Who here next time. Go everybody, check this man out. Like, if you haven't gained like any bit of knowledge from this, I don't know what to tell you, because there is so much more we can dive into. Chris is probably one of the more knowledgeable people that we've gotten to talk to in a while, and man, we barely scratched the surface. I've learned a lot, so I want to say thank you.
That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you.
Like, I mean, you kicked it off with a fun fact about Guinness I didn't know.
Yeah.
So
I'm fascinated. Yes.
I've done a lot of homework on Guinness too.
I'm very lucky. Well, the way I put it is, I'm a writer who's very lucky. I got sponsored by some incredible people, and there were individuals that still continue to trust me with their work. So I roll with it all. I'm very grateful for it all.
It's awesome. So thank you for hanging out with us. Everybody else, you know where to go. Hops Geek News, right? But Google this, man. Everything's in the show notes. Everything you need to know about Chris is going to be in the show notes. Follow that. Do yourself a favor. Read up on it. Trust me, you're going to want to. And we'll be catching you guys next time. Thanks for hanging out on our creator interview series. We will see you guys soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.